Hackers have targeted Planned Parenthood in Los Angeles, affecting nearly 400,000 patients. The reproductive health care provider says staff members first noticed suspicious activity on their computer network back in October, but says that there is no evidence so far that any patient's information was used for fraudulent purposes. Planned Parenthood is still notifying patients whose information was accessed. And this all comes as the Supreme Court justices heard arguments yesterday in a landmark abortion rights case. A majority of the justices signaled support for Mississippi's abortion ban after 15 weeks of pregnancy. But liberal-leaning justices argued Roe v. Wade has been in place too long to overturn. So joining us now to break down the arguments and to look at what's ahead is Director of the Robert A. Levy Center for Constitutional Studies, Cato Institute at the Cato Center, Ilya Shapiro. Ilya, thank you very much for joining us this morning. What were some of the key takeaways from Wednesday's first hearing?
Well, one thing that was striking was Justice Kavanaugh, who's been in the middle of the court since Justice Barrett replaced Justice Ginsburg, making Chief Justice Roberts the sixth man, no longer the fifth man in the middle. And Kavanaugh ran through a series of significant cases that had been overruled, that were longstanding cases that were overruled. Brown v. Board overturning Plessy versus Ferguson most significantly, and indicating, asking repeatedly why the court shouldn't be neutral, which in his terms means getting out of deciding abortion cases, sending everything back to the states, which would be overturning Roe versus Wade. So if he's not in play, then everything really does come down to Justice Barrett. And she expressed some concern about how to deal with stare decisis, the idea that sometimes you leave erroneous precedent in place because of reliance interests or because it would cause disruption to overturn it. Although she also talked about adoption laws and safe haven laws that make it less of a burden to raise children after they're born, which was one of the justifications for the abortion right in Roe. So will Justice Barrett go along with the more conservative justices in overturning Roe? Will she join with Chief Justice Roberts, who indicated that there might be a middle path in upholding Mississippi's law but not touching Roe? I don't know, but that's where the speculation is here a day after the argument.
How did attorneys respond or react to Justice Barrett's questioning, particularly about adoption options?
Well, it's interesting. In a lot of arguments, the argument isn't really going to change anybody's mind. This one especially, and so the lawyers on both sides did a very good job. But it was mostly the justices talking to each other. Both the United States Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar, who was supporting the challengers to Mississippi's law, and the attorney for the Jackson Women's Clinic, talked about how there's still a burden with the pregnancy, with having to go through childbirth, with disrupting women's lives and their reproductive rights, those sorts of things. So trying to minimize the idea that simply raising the child was the biggest issue. But at the end of the day, it was the justices sort of feeling each other out, and the attorneys, who, as I said, did a remarkable job. It was a very well argued case. But the justices were talking to each other, and it's, we only see the tip of that iceberg. Most of that goes on behind the scenes.
All right. The court's three liberal justices argued that reversing Roe v. Wade would significantly damage the court's legitimacy. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's with a lot of the high-profile culture war issues, not even culture war, Obamacare, or certain other things, whichever way the court rules, it's going to disappoint, 40, 45, 50% of the country. And that's certainly the case here. So I think there would be, it's obviously the highest profile case of the term. However, it's resolved in June. There's going to be a large section of the country that's upset. I think at the end of the day, people are happy with the court when it rules the way they like and unhappy when it's not. And it's really when judges think about extra legal issues and when people perceive that they're making decisions for political reasons that they start questioning whether the court really is just another political institution. It's one thing to disagree with the court ruling, and it's another to think that it's based on something other than the law.
So we've been talking about this as if, there's a possibility that there's sort of one or another clear outcome, that Roe v. Wade will be overturned or not. But is there perhaps something in the middle? I know that the three newest judges seemed to be siding with the Mississippi law and keeping it in place, upholding it. What sort of alternative outcome could there be other than just fully overturning Roe v. Wade?
This is what Chief Justice Roberts was pushing. He talked about how the idea of viability, that's not really part of Roe's holding in his mind, at least he was suggesting there's a way to uphold Mississippi's law, which restricts abortion past 15 weeks, without touching Roe, without having to consider Roe or rewrite its standard, because 15 weeks is enough of an opportunity to exercise the right to abortion. That seems to be the way that he is thinking. Can he get Justice Barrett is who he would need to get for that kind of middle position? Unclear, but I think that's what it would have to look like if there was a centrist compromise.
Ilya Shapiro, thank you so much.
My pleasure.